Thanks, Ryan, for joining me this afternoon. Appreciate it. I really want you to go ahead and let's get with the whiskey and the cigars. And because I love it. And the first time we met, that's what we did. We did cigars. You had some whiskey with my counterparts. So thanks for joining me. And I wish we actually started recording a couple minutes ago, because we already started having some great talk about S3s and who does what and who doesn't. But yeah, thanks for having me. I know you're busy.
Oh, it's great to be on. It's good seeing you again.
Oh, I appreciate it, Ryan. I appreciate it. So, what were we just talking about? Let's talk about it, because you're a misinformation, disinformation guy. We were talking about Col Doug McGregor. Tell me about the video you made of this guguy.
Okay, so he went on Tucker Carlson like last year, and I had all these people write me and said, "Is this true?" Because he was talking about how the U.S. wouldn't be able to defeat Russia, and one of the things he said, he talked about like how the U.S. wouldn't be able to resupply Europe because Russia has submarines.
Yeah,
Dude,
yeah, right.
We got that covered, man. We got their leaky submarines covered.
Yeah.
Maybe during the Cold War, it probably would have been an issue. But right now, I don't talk about Navy stuff all that much, mainly because I don't know enough about it. So when I need Navy help, I go to Sal. I go to Sal from What's Going On with Shipping. And he helps me out with some of that stuff, and he's great. But like a lot of Navy stuff, I'm like, I don't know. But I do know that for most of Russia's submarines are on what are called bastions. So I think it's the Kara Sea. They take their nuclear submarines. I think they're Bory class. For a guy who doesn't know a lot about the Navy, I can sure talk a lot about the Navy. They take their Bory class submarines and they kind of patrol in these bastions that are protected. So Russia's second strike capability, their second nuclear strike capability, are located in these bastions. And they don't really leave these bastions. They don't go out and patrol in the Atlantic or really go into the Pacific. It was like a big deal when Russia sent a submarine down to Cuba for an exercise.
Right.
And you can imagine all the guys at NAS Jacksonville, all the P-8 Poseidon pilots were like, "Oh yeah,
here we go,
it's party time." I'm sure they got a treasure trove of data, on that one.
Yeah, so I was just looking at this Colonel guy because I came across a video of his this morning, and what he was making the claim is he was making a claim that Israel was going to start a war with Iran before the election. And he had all these reasons to believe this was going to be the case, to include this cabal of 50 people within the Beltway, he said, that run everything within D.C. And they had all these financial reasons. And it was just boggling the mind. And I started to look at him, and I'm like, there's a lot of these knuckleheads online, right? They just say whatever they want, no big deal.
Yeah.
But and looking at this guy, he had a pretty long career and a pretty storied one. And, he was even, what I come to find out, he was even considered to be the ambassador for Germany under the Trump administration. It didn't work. The Senate didn't approve him, but he did become an advisor to the National Security Council. He's written a few books. One of them was pretty highly touted about changing the way the Army fights coming out of Desert Storm. And to me, these guys are the most dangerous. It's the ones that come to the plate with credibility and say, here's all the great things I did in my career. I actually did some stuff. And by the way, now Israel is trying to start wars just to win elections and do all these other. And it's like, wait a minute, bro. Like, you're the dangerous guy.
I call those people kind bars.
Yeah.
You look at a kind bar and you're like, oh, wow, this is really healthy. And you bite into it and it's nothing but junk inside there. Right? You might as well have a Snickers.
Sure,
right?
sure.
And there's this facade of like granola coating on it. Like, oh, this is good for me. And then you go, oh, wow, this is delicious. Well, it's delicious because there's junk in there.
Yeah,
right. The regional war thing, when people have talked about Israel, I go, oh, there could be a regional war. And I go, how? Tell me how. How do you have a regional war? Does Israel have expeditionary capability? No. There's only four and a half militaries that have the capability. The U.S., Great Britain, France, Russia, and China, to an extent, has expeditionary capability. Honorable mention goes to the Philippines because they're expeditionary when they walk outside the door and they patrol one of their 6,300 islands, right?
Sure.
But Iran can't invade Israel. Israel can't invade Iran. They just don't have the logistical capability to do it, or the size of a military to do
Sure.
it. So when someone says regional war, I go, okay, what does that look like? Tell me what that looks like. And then nobody can give me a response. Really, what it looks like is people just throw missiles at each other until you run out of missiles. And eventually, you run out of missiles.
Yeah.
Or interceptors. So, you know, yeah.
It's a great point, Ryan. I mean, and if you look back to the quote, you know, I don't want to, maybe I shouldn't say quote, but if you look back to the wars that Israel did fight since 48, obviously the day after they declared independence, they're invaded by 5 Arab countries. None of those were Iran. And those countries had militaries in some sense. Now, they don't even have to be expeditionary because they're right on the border, but they did have militaries with infantry units. And it could be supported by armor, maneuver, particularly Egypt.
Yeah.
And that's not the case for Iran. Iran has the IRGC and they have the Basij. The Basij is their national guard that hangs out and protects things, and they're awful at it. But you're totally right. But that does lead me to a question I did want to ask you is, you know, the whole question about World War III. Now, listen, I don't want to be hyperbolic, but I've been thinking about this for a while. Do you foresee, and I don't, let's not use the term World War III, but let's use the term escalation, wider conflict. Is it possible, given some of these new decisions that Putin has made, including the North Koreans, who I know at a tactical level are not going to make much of a difference, that's very few of them comparatively, but that does change the strategic landscape? If South Korea then gets involved and all these other things, and at AUSA, which you and I both attended, I heard some real strong I don't want to call it rhetoric, but explanations from NATO that this is potentially something that could happen in 5 to 10 years. What do you think about that?
Like an actual ground war in Europe?
Yeah, like an escalation to what we see now, more players involved, and then potentially even NATO.
If we don't, I mean, I think if we don't support Ukraine, we'll see that.
Okay,
almost definitely, because you know what's the ultimate goal? Like what's Putin's ultimate goal? I think he has I want to say it's 1,600 miles of undefendable border in Russia, right? There's no large, there's no mountains, there's no large rivers, you know, to prevent crossing. It's just tundra all the way to Moscow. And if Russia can take Ukraine, then they got the Carpathia Mountains, I think it's called. Carpathia Mountains on the left. So if Russia can take Ukraine, then they have natural barrier, the Carpathia Mountains on the left, and then, or on the west, and then they can take the Baltics and then Poland. And once they take Poland, it takes that 1,600 or so mile border down to 200 miles from the ocean all the way down to I forget the darn name of the mountain range. It's not the Alps, the mountain range in Poland. This is the problem doing it in memory when you're on a podcast. Right?
Yeah,
there's mountains, but it goes all the way down, right?
They're
just essentially protecting that one gap. So I think that's their ultimate goal. So we can either support Ukraine now with weapons. They haven't even asked for any men. Just give them weapons. Support Ukraine now with weapons, or we can fight with our kids in 10 years.
Yeah.
And your kids.
Well, yeah, right. Thanks.
That would require me getting a girlfriend if I, to perform the physical act of love that would generate a child. But,
the day will come, Ryan. I'm confident of that. So yeah, you know, I'm glad to hear you say that, because I think it's the same opinion that I hold. I think, you know, if you look at what Putin's trying to do with BRICS, if you look at the industrial capability he's trying to extend and increase today, if you just look at the GeoInt, you can see it. I think he really does want to try and shift the world power, the world narrative, not in some silly take over the world type thing, you know, that people harken back to with Hitler and those things. That's not it. But what he doesn't want is to be told what to do anymore. I think he's tired of that. President Xi is in the same boat. You know, it's a little more complicated with China, but very similarly, he just doesn't want to be told what to do. And I think if he can make that happen, He might. And when he feels that his military is ready to take on a NATO front, I think he just might. I really do. But I hope not.
Yeah. You're so BRICS is kind of weird when you think about it, because it's a bunch of nations that don't really export or trade with anybody except China.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's kind of the only trade powerhouse in there. I mean, Russia has oil. Russia exports oil. What does Brazil export? I think rail cars, maybe.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'd have to look at that.
Yeah.
They're even a partner in my state. I would have to I would have to look back. I
Rail
forget.
cars, I think.
Yeah.
South Africa. What does South Africa export? Diamonds.
little.
Like, when was the last time you bought something from South Africa?
Yeah, I think I have some
Right.
clothing, maybe, but anyways.
Yeah, maybe. And the I stands for Iran, right? Stands for
India.
Iran. India? Oh,
India.
well, India, well, they have a lot of tech workers.
They do.
Yeah, that's one thing. But so does Russia.
Yep.
Russia has a heck of a lot of tech workers too, and they're good. Russia has a lot of good programmers. India has good programmers too. And then one difference is that because Russia, this is one of the reasons Russian programmers are so good. And I've worked with Russian programmers. I mean, these guys were younger, like growing up post-Soviet Union or even during the Soviet Union. They didn't get computer time like in a computer lab the way we think of it. You might have one computer. So you write your software out on pen and paper. Yeah. And you get your slice of time, right? Or you might even have punch cards, the old punch cards like from the 1960s. You might have punch cards. Your program better be perfect. So the Russians got really, really good at writing software by hand in their head and writing software that runs well the first time. And I think that's one of the reasons why Russian programmers are so darn good. They didn't have a lot of tech to work with, so they had to make all of their tech work in a smaller memory space or run right the first time, because they didn't have an option like a guy in the West who grew up with a PC, right? And could just, that didn't work. Let me find the bug, recompile, and do it again. So yeah, India's programmers. I'm trying to think what else India exports. Can you think of anything? India export.
Yeah, I should have double checked before we started talking today if I wanted to bring up BRICS.
Yeah, right? Really, China is the only thing you buy stuff from, and I think we're slowly starting to realize that maybe as Americans, maybe we shouldn't have given up so much manufacturing just so we could have a $10 alarm clock. Right. Like what does that $10 alarm clock really give us? Like, let's give up all of our good manufacturing jobs so we can buy a TV for $400.
Right.
And I'm old enough to remember when a TV, I'm almost 50, I'm 49. I remember when you bought a TV, it was a significant investment, and they had TV repair shops. When your TV broke, you took it to the TV repair shop.
Right. It.
Yeah.
Nowadays we just throw them out.
Yeah, now we just throw them out. Like I have 4 monitors here and a TV over there, and the whole setup probably cost me less than $2,000.
Yeah.
So I guess in one sense we're living better in the sense that we have access to cheap stuff, but sometimes there's a cost to cheap.
Right? Oh, no doubt. There's a cause and effect for all of it, and you're right. And we're finding ourselves in a difficult position right now, especially since we're trying to ramp up on our military manufacturing, which we know is tied directly into civilian and the rest of the industrial complex. And I can even speak here locally in upstate New York, where they're expanding some of our local munitions factories, which we just weren't paying attention to because we didn't think we were going to need to do something like that. We just exported all this stuff, all the labor, and it's cheaper over in China. We'll buy more stuff. And then, and by the way, that doesn't even, then we haven't even begun to discuss, not only is it cheaper, but now China is taking its time to put all of its, counterintelligence capabilities inside of these systems. And now we're afraid that when we buy a Chinese EV vehicle, by the way, I don't know if you saw this, but the CEO of Ford now drives around a Chinese EV, and he says he has been for the last 6 months. Not only did that piss off his own people that work at Ford, as it should have, but Does Ford not have an internal intelligence unit like some of these other major corporations? Like, buddy. Anyways, so
Oh yeah.
now we've started purchasing all this stuff, and now we've got to go back and say, oh boy, maybe TikTok isn't a great idea. Maybe DJI isn't a great idea, right?
One of the things that I talked about, I was at a NATO summit or a NATO conference in Essen, Germany, and I spoke there about future drone warfare. One of the things I mentioned is that we need a drone industry here in the U.S. Just working for AeroMedLab, we can't sell or we can't purchase any drones that were built in China. And there have been times when like we've ordered parts and the website says like it's what was it, NAA or NA, I forget the darn code for it, but the website says like, yeah, this part wasn't made in China. Then we get the part and we open it up, it's made in China. What the hell, dude? Your website said it wasn't made in China. Yeah. So, right now, China definitely has the lead when it comes to producing small, cheap drones. And there's two schools of thought here. At AUSA, which you were at, which is this huge industry conference for the Army. I forget the darn name of the acronym, but this Army Association. Yeah. They're essentially everything on the floor was either drone or counter drone. That's everything, drone or counter drone. And there is a part of me, and I spoke about this too, where I said, like, we need to be very careful about thinking that the next war is going to look like Ukraine. And I say that because Ukraine is using drones because they have to. If we had given Ukraine enough artillery ammunition, or I should put that a different way, if we had enough ammunition to give, FPV drones are great. But you're only killing one dude at a time. Yeah. And you need to kill them by the bushel.
Of course.
What kills by the bushel? Artillery. So it takes the same amount of time to manufacture an FPV drone as it does like a loitering drone, a drone that can return. But the loitering drone with artillery can kill a heck of a lot more people, right? So if you're killing them in onesies and twosies, I mean, that's great. If you have to do that, and that's what Ukraine kind of realized, like, we're going to have to do that because if we don't, we're going to get overrun. So Ukraine used tech to kind of slow the Russian advance. But ideally, these drones would be used to spot for artillery.
Yeah.
So if we're running around going, oh, every soldier needs to have their own drone, every soldier needs to have an FPV drone that they can control, I mean, that's great. But I actually think that we're going to see in Ukraine the rise and the fall of the drone. Because when the war started, they had development cycles of like 6 months. All right, technology was progressing every 6 months. The Bayraktar cleaned up, and then Russia figured out how to jam it. And now, like, the development cycles are down. You're seeing innovation every 6 to 8 weeks. Now they have drones that are wire guided, like the old TOW missile, that can't be jammed. They just unspool a wire from the back of the drone as they fly to the target. So I think that what we're going to see before the end of the war in Ukraine is that counter-drone munitions become so good that drones aren't as effective as we think. And if we invest a lot of money into, oh, hey, we're going to give every soldier a drone, well, that might not be the best use case, right? Sure. You can't think the war is going to look like Ukraine.
Yeah, that's a great point, and you're the first one to bring up, Ryan, that and anybody that I've talked to about thinking more forward and about the post-drone era, potentially a potential post-drone era, because everyone's so focused on what the capabilities are today, and the fact that the United States is probably behind Ukraine, right? Because we haven't fought since our counterinsurgency battles and didn't need drones and all that stuff. So it's something to really ponder. I will say with the China being in the lead now, you're more of an expert in this arena than I am, given what you do for AeroMedLab and how tied in you are to at least the quadcopter, the Group 1, Group 2 level UAS stuff. I would say that we're still behind. I just had and I'm not going to talk about who I was with, but it's not fair to them. But I was with pretty large law enforcement agency recently talking about their capabilities and what they use and trying to express to them how using DJI products is just not the way we should be doing business here in the United States. Now, they're not a federal entity, so they're not banned
Yeah.
from doing so, right? They're not forced to use what we call the blue list UAS,
Yeah.
and they're non-federal. So, and but the response is, and I totally get it, is okay, but I have limited resources here, okay, and I can either buy this American-made quadcopter that does this, that has these capabilities, and they're actually slightly less than what DJI provides, and I can get one for 23 grand, or I can get the equivalent DJI, which by the way is a little better, for 7. I get 3 for
Yeah.
1. Like, what do you want me to do? You know, and it's hard to sell the morality, the ethical, and the 500-meter target discussion when they're worried about the 50-meter target. And so going back to your original point, the U.S. has really got to step up broadly and get their butt in gear in terms of getting these products out. Now, one of the other things, though, and you tell me if I'm wrong here, Ryan, isn't it the case that makes it so hard for companies like the U.S. is China's not necessarily interested, given how connected their businesses are with the CCP, in making all that much profit. So they can make their stuff more cheaply, and then say the U.S., who's has to follow restrictions and employment law and all those other things.
Yeah, I think that's certainly an issue. Like, I would like to say we need a domestic drone. We needed a domestic drone industry here.
Yeah.
A domestic hobbyist drone industry here in the U.S. And if that means tariffs, then that means tariffs. We have the ability to manufacture stuff here. The big issue that I see is that you have this knowledge base in China, and it's actually might be easier to develop factories and produce things than it is to actually have the knowledge workers that can remember how to do this stuff, right? Or that know how to do this stuff, that know how to troubleshoot this stuff. So that's kind of a thing there, where you have to worry about, like, all right, do I have the right knowledge workers to assemble the factory and assemble all the manufacturing equipment that we need to build these things? Because right now China's way ahead of us on that.
Yeah.
And that's probably the biggest stumbling block, because we might certainly be able to set up a lot of automated manufacturing to make things cheaply, but do we have the know-how to do that? Right? Could we build an iPhone here in the US?
Oh boy,
I don't know.
Hey, great question, and
Yeah.
I think we could. We just couldn't do it at scale. And I remember watching an interview that Tim Cook did, and I don't remember exactly when it was, 6 months ago, a year ago, whatever. And he was in China, and so take it with a grain of salt, right? There's an audience he's speaking to, but he was in China, and he was asked the question about why he's here. And producing the products, the iPhone and such, in China, given China's human rights record. And he said, it wasn't so much that I'm trying to lower costs because it's cheaper to use Chinese labor. It's actually that the labor is more skilled in China. They have people that know how to machine. They know how to use these advanced technological systems that the iPhone requires with such precision. Right? That labor pool just doesn't exist in the United States. We don't have those factories, and we don't have these people coming out of these programs, high school, college, whatever it is, trade programs. It's just not here. And so I think we could. I just don't think we could do it at scale.
There it is. It's the knowledge.
Yeah.
Right.
All right. So I'm I do my podcast here, Headlines in History, right? And you are you're a weapons guy. You're a current events military guy. That's where you operate. You're in the cyber world as well. But people that watch my little corner of the world over here, they do have connections and interests in history. So what what are yours? You got to have some, right? What is it in the history, military history world that gets you going a little bit?
Oh boy, that's a really good question. It's funny because I don't, I am very eclectic when it comes to my reading, and I've read
Yeah.
all kinds of history, military history, and other kinds of history. But that just kind of reminds me of, like, how, like, whenever you're in a military unit, there's always one guy who's into the German army a little too much.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
he plays Panzer generals, and you're watching Saving Private Ryan, and you're like, oh, that's a Leopard 2, and they're like, no, that's a Panzerfliegenflaugen.
Oh, right,
You
right,
can
right.
tell because it has the third bolt on the second road wheel.
Sure,
Like,
sure.
dude, you like this stuff a little too much, man. There's always that one guy in a
Yeah.
unit that's like into the German army a little too much.
Is this you, Ryan? Are you setting the stage for this?
No,
No,
not
no,
at
no.
all. Like, dude, I look at, like, when it comes to, like, Cold War stuff, I can identify that pretty well.
Yeah.
When it comes to like, oh, that's a Sherman 2A, or that's a Sherman 4A. You can tell because it has the swim vane. Like it's a tank. Like I don't know. Like there's special people that do that. Honestly, like, if I have, like, a genuine interest, it's probably in the nuclear delivery systems of the 1960s,
Hmm.
like, the Convair, the Hustler, the
Yeah.
B-52, and I look at the F-105,
Mhm.
the Thunder Chief, that was kind of supposed to be a nuclear bomber and was kind of pressed into a role as Wild Weasel.
Mhm.
For that era, I think I've read two books about that. I am really fascinated about the early air war days of Vietnam,
Hmm.
where you're dealing with dudes who were some of whom were still around when they went from the transition of propeller planes to jets, right?
Okay. Yeah.
When you think about it, there was once a famous picture of a Grumman, of a Tomcat, an F-14 Tomcat, flying next to a Grumman, like, Hell whatever plane, one of those Navy planes that they use as a torpedo bomber.
Yeah.
And there was 32 years between those planes. And you're like, wow.
Yeah. It's fascinating.
And it went from one of these little, torpedo bombers with a little spinny propeller to an F-14 Tomcat that has missiles that can go, what was it, 60 miles, 100 miles, Phoenix missile,
Sure.
something like that, and radar systems on board. That was 32 years. And now you fast forward to today, and the F-16 is as old as me. And
Right.
it's pretty much still looks like the same F-16. I'm sure all the electronics were ripped out and they put
Yeah.
new electronics in it, but it's still the same thing. And maybe we've kind of reached peak fighter jet, whereas, like, we kind of know what works,
Hmm.
So all the innovation is going in towards stealth and battle management systems. In fact, one of the reasons that supposedly I think they call it the T-7 Red Hawk. I might be wrong with the designation, but it's the new trainer that's replacing the T-38s. They manufactured this thing to be have the systems that are similar to the F-35, because airmanship is very important. Don't get me wrong, but what's really important is to teach these new flight officers, teach these new pilots how to manage all of these systems
Yeah.
and situational awareness while you're dealing with a computer. You're basically a flying computer, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of that's kind of interesting. But the one of my favorite things to read about is those early days of Vietnam, the early 1960s, 1963. There is I've read a couple of books about the F-105s in Vietnam, and specifically Wild Weasel. I forget the darn name of the book now that I think of it, the Wild Weasel book I just wrote. But, like, in the beginning, just that would make a great movie to me.
Hmm.
Just how we figured out, like, there was this one there was this one SAM battery. I want to say it was in 1963 that destroyed an American fighter, and it was Russians that were operating the equipment.
Yeah, of
Right?
course.
They were demonstrating it for the Vietnamese, but it was Russians, right? And in the span of less than 2 years, we figured out how to develop radar warning receivers that gave primitive directional capability. 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock directional capability. And we also figured out how to create anti-radiation missiles that would home in on the particular signal of they call it the Fire Song radar. Now, Fire Song, I think, was their anti-aircraft radar. I forget the name of the radar that was used for the SA-2. But we figured out how to create missiles that would home in on that particular signal. That was the Shrike missile, which wasn't all that good, but then it was replaced by the Standard missile.
Yeah.
That era, I probably gave you an answer way longer than you expected, but that era, I think, is absolutely fascinating because it was kind of the beginning of the whole one-upsmanship of tech. Okay,
Yeah.
You have surface-to-air missile tech. I'm going to invent another kind of tech that'll ride that beam all the way down. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to strap a jet to my butt, and I'm going to take off, and I'm going to bait you into turning your radar on.
Yes.
Can
Yeah.
you imagine that? Yeah, just imagine being in combat and standing up and going, "Hey, over here,
take
over
a look."
here." That's essentially what those wild weasel guys were doing.
Yeah,
So I think that's probably the one part of history that I like the most.
It's interesting because I have a similar one in the sense that there's a transition. I really love the World War I time frame, and it's similar because we're just coming out of the Civil War. People often tend to forget that the end of the Civil War is 1865, right? But World War I's only 1914. So in the grand scheme of things, it's really not that far along. And so we come out of fighting on horseback, Napoleon Civil War, obviously our Civil War and Napoleon in France, but nonetheless. And then you join World War I. We start fighting on horseback, particularly the Ottomans, and we come out of that thing using air power. And there's such a quick transformation. The machine gun is the one that's often talked about with trench warfare and things, but fighters, horses and airplanes at the same time is just like a weird combination to me. And there's a whole other
steampunk, right?
Yeah. And there's all these other reasons that the fall of empires and I love Lawrence of Arabia and that whole story. I love the quirky intel guy who's brilliant that nobody understands. But anyways, on and on. It's not about me, that's for sure. But no, I appreciate that you're choosing that time frame because it's not your basic one, right? Like somebody just, I love World War II because of Patton. Like everybody says that, right? So yeah, it's really neat that you have that like piece of our 20th century history that people just often don't link to,
Yeah, when you think about it, it was also that era that was just kind of going from analog to digital, right? Like the old one of my favorite stories from that era, although it actually went into the 1970s, was trying to destroy the Than Hoa Bridge in North Vietnam. There was this bridge, and I think they call it the Dragon's Jaw. This bridge, we thought we were going to destroy this thing in a couple of days, and it was a major artery from the north to get down to the south.
Yeah.
And it took 7 years to destroy this bridge. And part of the problem is that we didn't have guided munitions. So we were just sending sortie after sortie against this bridge. We even tried putting like a floating mine inside of a C-130 and like dropping that mine in the river, hoping that the mine would float down to the bridge and hit a pylon and detonate it. And we started using one of the first guided weapons. I think it was called the Walleye, one of the first like guided missiles, and the operator had to use a joystick inside the cockpit. There was a flare, like a magnesium flare on the back of the missile, and he had to fly the plane and look at this little flare going down to the bridge, and the thing had I want to say it was like a 300-pound warhead, so it hit the bridge and do nothing.
Yeah, right.
And then eventually, like the guys at Texas Instruments, the people that make calculators, the guys at Texas Instruments came up with an idea to use a laser guided bomb. They called it the Paveway. And they finally dropped the damn bridge with a Paveway. I think it was fired from an F-111. After 7 years, multiple aircraft lost, multiple sorties. We just couldn't take down that bridge. And we finally did it with this combination of like high tech and just dudes trying to like use a little joystick while looking at a flare.
The old Atari joystick, probably.
Yeah, I
something similar.
I don't know exactly what that joystick looked like, but that would be probably a neat thing to research.
Yeah, right. I mean, they're using the Xbox joysticks nowadays to try to teach soldiers and airmen how to fly UAS systems because it's what they know growing up in high school, right? So it'd be fun to see if it was an Atari one.
In my previous career when I was working for Accenture, we worked on C4ISR software. And one of the things that we could slave was a camera. So we might have like an aerostat that's floating up in the air. I'm sure you saw them in Iraq or Afghanistan.
Oh yeah.
These aerostats that have radar on them, cameras. We could even, like when the bad guys fired a mortar round, we could detect that with the radar, swivel a camera toward the point of origin, calculate the point of impact, swivel a camera to the point of impact, and then choose to shoot it down with a CRAM system, the counter rocket artillery and mortar system, if it was going to land in a populated area. But one of the things we used to control, we had a choice. We could control the camera with this thing cost $20,000. It was a joystick. Like it looked like a pilot's joystick or like the HOTAS controller or whatever that you see on an aircraft. We could buy that for $20,000, or we'd use an Xbox controller.
Right.
What option do you think was more popular?
Yeah, of course.
The Xbox controller costs less. They were rugged as hell, and every kid knows how to use an Xbox controller.
Sometimes you just got to go with the simplest, smartest way.
Yeah,
who cares?
The Xbox. I have stories from that time as well about like missions where like there was a time when I got a call. I got this reputation there as the fixer. Have you ever watched Mad Men? That TV show Mad Men.
I have. Yeah, I haven't seen all of it.
Was it Roger Sterling? He was the cooler, right? Whenever there was a customer that was flipping out, they sent in Roger Sterling and he'd calm them down. For some reason, I don't know what it is about me, but like everybody likes me, right? Like I have this, I don't know what it is, but I for some reason, like I would go out to a client site and I would come back and the client would have a problem. They're like, send Ryan back here, and I would go and I would never solve the problem, but I knew everybody at Accenture, and I would call the right person, be like, hey, this client has a problem. What should I? Okay, go to settings, system, camera. Okay, yeah, hit that checkbox. Okay, I hit that checkbox. Hey, I got it working. Ryan, you're a genius. No, I just know who to call.
Yeah, so right.
I got this reputation as the guy to call, and one time we were under our techs were under fire. They were taking their. Well, I should probably back up to tell the story. I got a call at like 3 a.m, and I'm like, what is it? And this dude, he had my number, and he was a tech out in the field, and I guess this was in Horn, Africa, where this happened.
Yep.
And the dude was like, "Yeah, hey Ryan, I hate to bother you, but we can't turn the system on." Like, I'm a programmer. I'm not like a technician.
Yeah, right.
I was a systems architect, but I had this reputation as the guy that fixed stuff. So he called me. He's like, "Yeah, I can't turn the system on." I'm like, "Well, all right. Well, did you try? Did you reboot it? Did you unplug it? Did you do this? Did you do that?" He's like, "Yeah, well." We took it out of the trailer and we put it into the Army TOC, the Army Tactical Operations Center, and now it won't turn on. And I was like, "Oh, did you plug it into the network of the Army's network by any chance?" He's like, "Yeah." Like, all right, you just bricked the machine.
Yeah.
Because when the machine turned on, it went, "Oh, what network am I on? Oh, crap, I'm not supposed to be on this network." Clunk.
Yep. Exactly.
And I'm like, I need to send you I need to send you I need to re-image the whole system. And I had to go in that Saturday and burn like 14 DVDs because the Army doesn't let us use a freaking thumb drive, right?
Right.
So I had to burn like 14 DVDs. And, at first I was like, why the heck did you do that? And he was like, well, we were being overrun. So we pulled okay.
Yeah. Right.
Like we pulled the blades out of the server rack, and we thought we could plug them into the Army network and connect to the. Like, all right, I mean, good initiative, bad execution.
Yeah. Right.
But when you're being overrun, I kind of understand why you might do something like that. You're not particularly thinking straight.
No joke. What would you say if I asked you and you had to choose in today's environment, not in history, in today's environment, what is your favorite weapon system? It doesn't even have to be ours. It could be one of our adversaries. Is there a certain system that sticks out to you that you're like, you know what, this thing's pretty cool?
I might be. I am almost definitely biased here, but it would probably be the TOW system.
Yeah. Okay.
I kind of grew up on that weapon system. I was an anti-tank guy before they said, okay, poof, you're all 11 Bravo.
Right.
What's kind of neat is that the TOW slaved with the ITAS. It is such a powerful tool, just for not only just for observation and a heavy weapons company, which what I understand, the Army's getting rid of the heavy weapons companies, and they're just going to take a platoon and put it in headquarters. So the infantry brigade combat teams are all losing their heavy weapons, which is sad, but you don't win wars by nostalgia.
That's correct.
And I think that the Army is kind of realizing these infantry brigade combat teams, they just don't have the logistical ability to get fuel to all of these gun trucks.
Yep.
Right. And it's kind of sad because, it was great. You could split off a platoon, have that platoon do support by fire. You could, dude, we got no sleep. Weapons company dudes get no freaking sleep because it's always like, we need you over here because we have to escort the commander to get his lucky coffee cup. He left it in the talk, and all right, Roger. Do another mission, right? Yeah. We got to go up to Taji to get a tent peg. Oh, okay.
Yeah, right. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. But it's just when we got the ITAS, and I was used to the old TOW system. I forget the damn nomenclature of the site on that, but with the ITAS, we had Raytheon, well, I guess now RTX people come out and teach us how to use the ITAS, train the trainer kind of thing. And I was noticing, we had this open field, and all the ITAS. ITAS means improved TOW, ITA, acquisition system, ITAS. We were pointing out this open field, and there were these artifacts, these white artifacts that kept popping up on my ITAS. And I was like, oh, great. They gave me one that was jacked up. I went and got one of the Raytheon techs. I was like, dude, you need to look at my ITAS. It's messed up. There's these artifacts popping up. And he's like, oh, no, those are groundhogs.
No kidding.
So 800 meters away, we're seeing the heat signature of a groundhog pop up and go back down again.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And when the TOW system, when I found out the TOW system was being delivered to Ukraine, I actually made a video, and I made it Creative Commons, so that way people could take it and translate it. And I wanted people to take it and translate it into Russian, because I basically begged the Russians, please call this number and self-surrender because you're going to die. the TOW, it can see through fog. It can see through smoke.
Yep.
We're going to find you and you're going to burn. And I don't want you to die. I want you to live and maybe go back to a free and democratic Russia one day, but I want you to live. And, the TOW system, I've seen footage of it working in Ukraine, and it works.
Yeah.
If we can see you, we can kill you. And it's probably the TOW system that's my favorite weapon system. But that's going to be replaced by that new joint. It was like joint standoff, or I forget the darn name of that thing. But that's being replaced by something that go out like 8 kilometers, something like that.
Yeah, and
things improve.
Everything's going to the joint environment as it probably should, given the way that the landscape's changing, and then obviously even to a NATO, pushed even further into a NATO standard, because we're all just going to be fighting alongside our allies as well. We're not doing this all on our own, right?
Absolutely. And I made an excellent video. I thought it was an excellent video. Where I made an excellent video where I talked about how the true the plan to defeat China. That was my thing. It was the plan to defeat China.
I think I remember that video, Ryan. Yeah.
Yeah, and people think like, oh, we're gonna, America can't defeat China and its navy, but it's not us. It's us and the UK and France and Canada and Australia and New Zealand and the Philippines and Japan and probably South Korea is going to party as well. So it's all about just even working with NATO guys. Like these guys are committed to the greatest alliance that the world has ever known.
Yeah. Hey,
that's all those guys up there, except Serbia. Serbia, not exactly an ally, but the Serbian who sent me that patch also sent me a stealth fighter.
Love it. There you go. Okay,
you win this one, guys. You got that one fair and square.
That's pretty cool. Hey, you made me think of something, Ryan. I'm curious as to your thought on this. I'm going to go a little bit diplomatic, right? We'll step out of our comfort zone a little bit, but let me know what you think. I said earlier, a couple of months ago, I did a little something on what we may see if we were ever to be engaged with China, what we may see from NATO. Now, clearly NATO is a European defense pact. It doesn't consider China in particular. But my argument was that NATO, being the greatest defense pact that has ever existed, it stood the test of time. It's obviously done very well. That potentially we might see some type of a morphed version of NATO, something that's built upon a structure that already exists. Now, I know we have some other alliances that are in the Pacific, but they're nothing like what NATO is. Doesn't have the money, doesn't have the history, doesn't have the training. We were in Afghanistan together for 20 years in a NATO environment. So I wonder if we could see ourselves expanding upon NATO in a way if we find ourselves in an event in a conflict with China. What do you think? Is that too far?
Expanding on NATO?
I mean, let's say
like Australia joining NATO. I mean, Australia really, I mean,
South Korea, Japan.
Yeah, right. I think that's certainly possible. I think that's a little beyond my ability to really talk about. Mainly because I'm more into the actual weapon systems. Not that deep of a thinker.
I wouldn't say that.
When it comes to geopolitics. But yeah, I mean, I guess I could see that. The question is like, the one advantage of NATO is that it's a common alliance for a common area.
Yeah.
Right. Like Canada excluded from that, like, the alliance with Canada, well, that kind of comes from the fact that Soviet bombers would have to fly over Canada to get to the U.S. So I can kind of understand why Canada would join NATO. Yeah. But if Australia joins NATO or South Korea joins NATO, that would mean if there was a conflict in Europe, South Korea would somehow have to get troops there.
Sure.
And they don't exactly have an expeditionary military.
No. Yeah.
So that would be on us. Right.
Listen, something happened to me, shifting gears a little bit, go back towards history. So, there's as you know, I'm still in, I do all of this stuff. It's all my own opinion, personal life stuff. But as you know, I'm still in the military today. And I've been in the 42nd Infantry Division for a long time, most of my career, National Guard Division up here in New York. And I was asked recently to take over to be the historian for what's called the Rainbow Division Veterans Foundation. So it's basically the division's, just that. It's a foundation. It's a group of there's a board and there's a chairman, and a lot of them are the commanding generals from history. And nonetheless, anyway, so I was asked to do this, and it's a bit, let's not call it scary. That's not the right word, but it's going to be a challenge, right? The 42nd spent a lot of time in World War I and World War II. Now we have some GWAT service as well, but there are people that are part of this organization that really like the details and the knowledge of the things like the weapon systems and the tanks and the aircraft and those kind of things from World War II. So when I was and even World War One, so I was sitting down with the team yesterday as we were talking about this. The first thing that came to my mind was you, and I'm like, all right, well, listen, I'm gonna have to call Ryan. I'm going to call Ryan. So when some descendant from the 42nd Infantry Division from 1944 calls and says, "Hey, my father was in the 222 regiment and he had the such and such grease gun, and do you know the nomenclature for that? You're the historian for the group." And I'm going to say, "Listen, yeah, let me just check my notes." And my notes are going to be email Ryan McBeth. And let's see if Ryan will get back to me anytime soon.
Yeah, I think when we were leaving Iraq, there was a guard unit that had brought grease guns with them. I didn't even know that 45 caliber ammo was in the inventory, but I guess because the grease guns on their property book, they brought it with them to Iraq. And the Navy that was, doing the customs, they X-ray everything leaving Iraq.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh yeah.
The Navy was like, "Well, where's your paperwork?" Like, what are you talking about? Like, you need paperwork for a trophy? Right. Like, no, this is my issued weapon.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I brought this, I swear.
No, I'm sure it was like the A3 or something. I'm sure it was a more advanced version of the grease gun, but sure it wasn't one from World War II. But yeah, I mean, look, those things were cheap and they freaking worked. And I don't know where you got ammo for them. 45 caliber ammo. We had trouble getting shotgun ammo in Iraq. I would, those amnesty boxes that were around. Was it Slayer?
Well, all the fobs had them,
Striker. Right? Yeah, it was, what was the one fob that you left? And it was where all the transient. It was on Camp Victory. Can't remember the damn name of the fob.
Oh, I went through Balad because I was okay. Up north. So
there's this one fob, and it's where everyone would enter and leave, and there were transient tents there for people to set up before they got on the plane.
Yeah.
And they had all these amnesty boxes, and it was always good to like go there when a unit was rotating out because like the amnesty boxes had a lock, like a hasp and a lock, but the amnesty boxes are made out of plywood and they just had screws holding them in.
Yeah,
right?
Of course. Yeah.
So
brilliant.
Like I had this Dremel, like this automatic battery powered screwdriver. You just go over to the other fob and you just take the top off. Rummage through, looking for shotgun. Hey, I got a M9 mag. You want an M9 mag? Rummage through. All right, I got it. Trying to find shotgun shells. And one time I found a mortar round, and I'm like, I'm just gonna put this back.
Yeah. I want nothing to do with that.
I don't want to deal with whatever this thing is. I don't know anything about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My favorite Iraq story about what's coming into country and you're not really realizing, and then or maybe you shouldn't have brought it in the first place. Talking about this grease gun thing, so before we went up to Iraq, I spent about 3 weeks in Kuwait. I was a young sergeant at the time.
Yeah,
and we were there longer than we should have been for a lot of reasons, but nonetheless, I ended up getting tasked with going to the wash rack at Buring for about 5 days, and we had to do the midnight shift. So I started, you put on your wet weather gear, your boots, the whole nine, and you climb under these old 2.5s and 5 tons, and you're just cleaning these things as they get ready to be shipped back to the U.S. And remember, at one point, it's like 3:00 in the morning, and it's we're just soaked, and I'm sitting under this massive 5-ton, and we're spraying, and we're just getting gobs of mud and grass and all of this stuff that's coming out of the bottom of the truck. And I'm like, there's no mud and grass in Kuwait. Like, what the come to find out, this National Guard unit had brought all of their stuff, everything that they owned, and they never cleaned it well enough when they got in it. So they brought it all into Kuwait. And now here I am cleaning all this crap off. Wow. And it was never even used in country. And I'm like, well, this doesn't even make any, whatever.
There was a woman, now this story might be apocryphal, but there was a woman I knew. I want to say she was Wyoming National Guard, but I think she was part of the initial invasion. I might be getting the state wrong, but but she was in a bridging unit,
Hmm.
and they brought all of their boats with them. And like, I guess they got there too late, and the Army was like, "Yeah, we don't need any bridging units, but put your boats over there. We're gonna use you for convoy escort." So all this woman did was convoy escort. And when I was in Iraq, I still kept in touch with this person, and I took a picture. I was at this one fob, and I took a picture of these boats. It was the weirdest damn thing. So all these boats, like in a motor pool, and they're just sitting on like trailers, all these boats. I took a picture. It was the weirdest damn thing I'd ever seen. And I think I mentioned it to this woman, and she said, "Can you send me that picture?" She said, "Those are our boats." I guess I don't know if that's true. I don't know how you can tell one boat from another,
right.
but maybe if you're a boat captain, you can, or whatever you'd call the boat operator. I'm like, those are your boats. Like, I didn't get close enough to get like a bumper number off the boat or something, but
right.
yeah, I mean, that's what I guess they still had those boats, and it was cheaper to leave them in Iraq than it was to actually bring them back.
Yeah, sure.
Which is kind of crazy. I guess maybe they got new boats, or I don't know what happened with that unit. But again, might be apocryphal.
Yeah, but still,
right?
Listen, there's plenty of stories out there about the National Guard getting involved and bringing all their stuff that I'm sure there's truth to it. You and I have seen crazier things in the Army, that's for sure, right? We've seen
There was a story. I did this one video about maintainers, like people who maintain aircraft.
Yeah.
And I interviewed all these maintainers, and this one maintainer told me a story of an F-16 that came back with a cracked canopy. And the F-16 can't fly with a cracked canopy.
Right.
So, but like all the canopy parts are still on order, and they're always pushing. The command is always pushing, like for uptime. You got to turn these jets. You got to get these jets fixed for the next morning because they're going up again.
Yeah.
And you've heard of the E4 Mafia, right? The Air Force has an E4 Mafia too. This woman said that she called around until she found another squadron. The squadron was like, "Yeah, we have a canopy that's scratched, and the F-16 can fly with a scratched canopy, but not a cracked canopy. But this canopy was supposed to be mounted onto a plaque for a pilot that was retiring."
Yeah.
So they're like, "Listen, if you can sneak the old canopy in and replace it and sneak out the scratched canopy, you can have the canopy." And so there was this E4 Mafia mission to go drop the again. Like, I don't, and they put the new canopy on, and the aircraft was able to fly the next day. Now, I don't know how true that is, because I would imagine like there's a part system on computer and there's serial numbers and stuff like that. But I also know E4s.
Man.
They'll do some shady stuff, and you don't necessarily want to ask questions.
That's for sure.
Like, how did you get this canopy, sir? Don't worry about it, sir.
Yeah.
Right.
Plausible deniability. Don't ask me.
So I don't believe that story, but I kind of do.
Yeah. Listen, speaking about aircraft, let's talk AeroMed a little bit.
Absolutely.
Yeah, let's tell us about what's going on with AeroMed. I think it's the little that I know that we've talked about in the past. I think it's a brilliant idea. And I really wish it all the best. But talk to us about it.
So about a year ago, I was at this convention in Austin. I was speaking at a cybersecurity convention, and while I was there, this guy Cody Hatfield, he emailed me and said, "Hey Ryan, since you're in Texas, I work for the Drone Combat Lab of Dallas, Texas, University of Dallas of Texas. Would you like to come up and see some of the stuff we're doing?" And I'm thinking, like, all right, I don't have a job, right? So like I can do this.
Yeah.
So hey, Southwest, $99, change my flight, and fly up to Austin, or fly up to Dallas from Austin. And I visit the Drone Combat Lab. And this guy had a drone lab operating at a University of Texas at Dallas called the Drone Combat Lab, where he's developing these anti-drone drones. And he showed me the whole lab and the theory of operation. He's like, "What do you think?" I'm like, "Dude, I'm surprised there aren't blue-haired idiots protesting outside your door right now. Call some of the drone combat lab. I don't care if you're in Texas or not. Like, this lab kills children. That doesn't stop. Logic never stopped the blue-haired idiots, right? So I said to him, like, what we really need in the military is we need to be able to deliver whole blood to the front lines. 'Cause I'm acquaintances with Aaron Epstein, who runs the Global Medical Surgical Support Group. And it's basically these doctors that travel around and teach trauma surgery to Ukraine, but also like other areas of the world, people who need it. And Aaron Epstein wrote this paper called Putting Medical Boots on the Ground. And one of the things I read in this paper is that medevac is over. During the global war on terror, if you got blasted, dude, call a medevac, right? Everyone practiced 9-line medevac. We had the card in our helmets or in our LBV. Take the card out. All right, line 1, location, grid, Echo Golf, whatever. And that is gone because the Russians or the Chinese, they will shoot medevac helicopters down. Either the radar can't see the fact there's a red cross in the helicopter, and the Russians or Chinese probably don't care anyway. So we have to prepare for a post-medevac world. Well, 80% of all soldiers who die of hemorrhagic shock. They bleed out. They bleed to death. Human body has 5 liters of blood. You can get down to about 1.5 liters. After 2 liters, you're pretty much done.
Yeah, right.
So AeroMedLab was started to deliver whole blood to medics so they could perform transfusion, or even CLS, combat lifesavers, to do transfusions on soldiers. And these drones operate solely by AI. There's no GPS. There's no radios in them that can get jammed. We tell this drone where to go, and the drone uses a compass. It uses the accelerometer, same kind of accelerometer that's in your phone. And it uses train matching, kind of like the Tomahawk missile, to figure out how to get out to the casualty. It can pitch the blood through a window or into a trench or into a bunker and then fly back. You just got to lay out a VS-17 panel. Everybody has a VS-17 panel. Lay out a VS-17 panel. The drone will figure out, okay, it wants me to go into the window right there. It'll pitch the blood right into a window. That way the medic doesn't have to leave to go retrieve that box of blood. Blood thermos, it keeps the blood cool. I think we had it out in like 100-some degree temperatures in New Mexico for 4 hours, and it was still transfusible. Actually, the thermos might actually work a little too well because blood is supposed to be like warmed before you actually transfuse it.
Right.
So we might actually have to make the thermos box a little less thermal.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. We kind of over-designed this thermos box. But most of our missions, they're not going to be 4-hour missions. They're going to be 30-minute missions.
Yeah, of course.
Right. Because we go to the FIBA, we're at the aid station or the hospital, the field hospital that has blood. Put the blood in the thermos, put the thermos on the drone. The drone goes the 20 kilometers to the FLOT, right? Drops off the blood, comes back. So max 40-kilometer journey, max 40 minutes. So we could theoretically transport it without the thermos. But people get freaked out when you tell them that. So we put it in the thermos. It's protect. We actually tried. This is a funny thing. We were in New Mexico testing this stuff. We actually tried to break an IV bag. We brought a drone up to like 500 meters, which is way higher than we fly. We fly about 3 meters off the ground.
Right.
So we tried to break a blood bag of IV fluid, and it wouldn't break.
Oh, no kidding.
We tried to break this thing.
Yeah.
These bags are pretty resilient. But yeah, and then when the drone gets back, all of that camera data gets downloaded into a database, and that becomes the terrain matching for the next mission. Right. So we're constantly taking pictures as we're flying, and that data gets loaded into our maps. So
yeah, is that cloud connected? In that
absolutely not. No, I mean, I guess it could be, but the issue is that any kind of radio is going to get you killed.
Right. Of course.
So, in fact, even one of the things that we've talked about is we need a semaphore. So let's say we have to move. We have to change locations in between when the drone comes out and the drone comes back. The drone's going to always return to its point of origin unless we tell it not to.
Right.
But if we suddenly have to pack up and move because the Russians are coming, we need to leave like a code so that drone knows, okay, fly at this many degrees for this many miles to meet up with us. And the semaphore will probably be a VS-17 panel laid out in a certain pattern, and the drone will just know, okay, this is where I get my instructions from. So that way there's no radios involved, so it can't be jammed, it can't be hacked.
Yeah, that's great. That's great.
And we're growing. We actually just bought our first, we bought a new office. I think we did. I don't know. We move in on the 1st.
Well, you better have had some deal done.
Yeah, we better. I think. Well, the CEO, I think she just signed that, like literally as we're talking.
Yeah.
I think she just signed the paperwork for that. I haven't looked, but I got an email from the CEO to talk. So I probably have to deal with that fairly soon.
That's great.
But we're growing. We're going to have to hire 3 engineers. We're going to have to hire an electrical engineer, 2 programmers to help write our mission planning software. Because right now our mission planning software is like a JSON. It's like a text file.
Yeah, right.
So you go, okay, go here, go here, go here, follow this route. And we need to be able to show a map and show, all right, ... We worked on the AI before we did the mission planning, because the AI, of course, without the AI, you don't have a product, right?
No, yeah.
So,
understood.
Yeah, we're growing. We have an indoor test area now, an area for electrical engineers. Well, we will once we get this place and build it out. And I think that should happen on the 1st.
Oh,
so,
that's awesome.
Thank you for asking about it.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great concept, and I had a chance to meet the CEO, down at AUSA, and she's great, and listen, anything that's going to help the soldiers on the battlefield, right? That's what we need to work on, this is the future.
Ideally, we can keep them alive long enough to bring them back after logistics are pushed forward, right? Because logistics go forward, log packs go forward, casualties come back. So ideally, we can keep them alive long enough for them to come back with the logistical convoy.
Yeah, awesome. Well, listen, Ryan, thanks for joining me today. We're getting on the hour. I don't want to take too much of your time. I know you're busy. And thanks for coming on, and I appreciate it. We've great talk, and I'm sure I'm going to have plenty of questions from folks that pay attention to the show, and they're going to want to have you back, and so maybe we'll do that someday. But thanks again, Ryan. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for inviting me, John.
Yeah, thanks, bud.